yeah, let me make sure my HD, is everybody's HD on?
I think mine is.
Okay,
We are
good.
live though. So
We're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another CLCI Live on Tuesday. I'm going to turn it, today we're going to be interviewing one of our students, and I'm going to turn it over to Jerome to take over from here.
You probably should.
hello everybody and welcome to, as Brooke mentioned, another Tuesday Live. Today we are featuring one of our recently graduated Master Certified Life Coaches. His name's Eric. I'll let him do a little bit more introducing himself. But today we are just spotlighting Eric and spotlighting not only where he is and where he plans to go, but also trying to assist him in any spaces that he may have questions about as far as moving on with his practice. So without further ado, I will now turn it over to Eric so he can go ahead and give himself an introduction.
Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for letting me join you this evening. I'm Eric DeWershow. I'm in Wilmington, Delaware, and if you don't know where Wilmington is, you may have heard of President-elect Joe Biden. This is his hometown. We actually live very close to him and have known him for years. So we're obviously in Delaware. One of our own has been elected, and we're very excited about that. But thanks for letting me join you tonight about life coaching. I've completed level 2, and to really focus my life coaching skills, I've really carved out a specific niche. I'm a semi-retired lawyer here, and I am focusing my skills on working with young and soon-to-be retiring lawyers, kind of both ends of that spectrum. Law right now is just about every other profession is with the COVID, is very, very challenged. Even before COVID, a lot of folks are looking for the best way forward and coming up with how to maximize their personal and professional dreams and aspirations. So I work with clients doing that, and also with entrepreneurs. So very excited, having just completed level 2, got a lot of brand new skills here. I've got a few clients, and certainly going to be working these new skills with them. So again, thanks for all the help.
Nice.
Thank you for being here. It's lovely to see you and know how amazing you're going to be with the coaching that I'm imagining that you already were as a lawyer, since you're being tapped now to help other future lawyers. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's an interesting process because it's obviously so different than law. In law, we do ask leading questions. We do try to push opinions and thoughts, and the questioning is pretty much on the other end and the extreme. So I've had to unlearn and kind of relearn a whole new process. So that's been challenging personally.
That's really quick. Sorry, I just want to say hello to Britt. Hi, Britt Myers. Welcome. And on that note, I want to encourage anybody who's watching to comment and ask any questions. We are monitoring, and we'll say hello. On that note, Eric, I wanted to. So, if you were still doing law, do you think that after taking the class, it might change the way you question anything or question? I mean, an approach it anyway.
You know, it's well, I've cut back on my trial work, so that's very different. But what I haven't cut back on is talking to clients, and a lot of the same things that we learned in life coaching, we do when we talk to clients. Mirroring, you know, what I understand you're telling me is that is so effective in talking to anyone, showing that you are hearing. Sometimes reframing it in an objective way. So the answer to that is yes. A lot of the same questioning skills can find applicability in just talking to people, you know?
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. So you're going to be doing, your practice will be helping lawyers, right? Correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
and entrepreneurs too.
And entrepreneurs. What can a coach do for lawyers? I'm just curious. How will that work out?
Well, lawyers are with COVID are stressed. A lot of lawyers are working at home right now, juggling family, trying to be a lawyer and also be a teacher at the same time. That's extremely stressful. With law, you have very specific and severe cutoffs, and times you have to do certain things by a certain date. And without, and a lot of times talking to your compatriots is very helpful. What would you do about this? So these are all lines of communication that have been cut. And even with Zoom, the great technology of Zoom, it's still difficult with the COVID restrictions. Now we do have our staff coming in, but we have limited, sometimes they're working in a hybrid situation. So it's all very, very challenging. That and billable hours, trying to make a profit for the law firm, which is really a company in a sense. It's got to be profitable. These are all challenges, but a lot of time management challenges I can see. Just how do I manage my time? I'm in the office, but my office is often my home. What am I doing and when?
That is a tough thing, I think, for all entrepreneurs, especially if I'm somebody who's worked from home, and so it's always been a thing, because I have for years and years and years now, to know that difference, that moment. Am I clocked in now? Am I working now? When am I not working? And then also to I've heard a lot of people say, well, if I work from home, I wouldn't be motivated to work. My problem is I'm not motivated to stop working.
Exactly. It's not really, and me too. I mean, I'm in that situation because I've had to cut back in terms of my in-office appearances. Are you working? Or are you not working? It seems like all the time you are working, when you're not. So it's a very confusing situation for all of us.
Holly says hi. Holly Boyder. She was in your class. She wanted to say hi to you, Eric.
Oh,
she's watching. Jerome, do you have any questions?
Well, I just think it's interesting, kind of what we're speaking about, because this is something that I think a lot as of recent with COVID, I guess not really recent anymore. It's kind of been lingering now, but just that space of knowing when to switch over from, home time over from work. And I've actually recently read an article speaking about just tips and tricks, how to kind of switch you off when it comes to trying to find that balance and provide yourself with not necessarily downtime, but time away from work. So again, like I mentioned,
what were the tips? Will you share? If anybody has it, share, please.
One big one is to separate your office from your living space. So that is, if you're someone who is going to work in your room, that usually more than likely your brain's going to immediately focus on work. When you're in a room, when ideally your room should be kind of for sleeping, right? So that's one big one that I took away from it. Another one is just being strict with your time, letting it be known that at this particular time it's no longer time to work, and then it is time to transition over to your personal life.
Brooke, I can tell you what I've tried to, I've done exactly what Jerome's saying. I've also tried to keep a calendar like I would if I was in the office with what I'm doing. And again, personal versus business, marking out times of the day. So it makes it more work-like, or at least organized. Like otherwise, it all kind of gets mixed up in a blender. And I do think it's important to separate.
I completely agree, having that moment. I know that what I have to do is I have to set chunks of time that I go, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. I've been bad about it this last week, but I'm usually very good. And I make sure that I get those little me moments in there. This is very important, but it doesn't always work out that way, but that's, I will get better at this.
Because I mean, if your office is at your home, you always have the ability to go ahead and knock out something that needs to get done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and then my phone is part of the problem. Like it's like I need to just set the phone down and be away from the phone. I've found because otherwise I'm always looking at it and then jumping on top of whatever needs to happen, when it could probably sit for a second, but I have to do it right then and right there.
I recently reread, and we talked about in level 2, the 7 habits of highly effective people.
Mhm.
And he talked about a level there of importance, but not urgency, and trying to move into the paradigm number 2. And it's even actually more important now, I think, with COVID, and it's even harder to do it because one of the things you're talking about, which we all kind of get thrown into, is let's do the unimportant, easy things. That would be a paradigm number 4, which he's saying stay away from that. But it's actually easier to fall into that without having an office. That's what I'm finding. So you have to even work harder, I think, at it.
So a while ago, and you're reminding me of it. I should use this more often. We created this tool. It's called the Better To-Do List, and it's based on Eisenhower's kind of to-do list. And I might be able to pull it up. If I can't pull it up, what I'll do is, but basically on one side here, I could do.
I think we have it on the website.
Yeah, I think we do. Wait, hold on. Oh, I don't know what just happened. My thing just went crazy on me. Sorry, guys. I have it right here. I do. I'm freezing. Do you guys, am I looking okay? Because everything keeps like freezing up on my end. I'm not physically cold.
Looking good on this end.
Okay, good. So let me pull it up really quick. But it's based on Eisenhower, and this reminds me of it because one side is urgent, not urgent, and the other side is I believe is it important, not important, and then you list it based on what's urgent and what's important, what's not urgent and still important, and it breaks down to do, delegate, ditch, and something else, or delete and something else, which I thought was a really cool thing. But it speaks to what you're just talking about there.
I have a friend that she would have a category like all of those, but she'd also have a category that said, I'd really like to do it, but I'm never going to do it category.
So this is it here. I'll show. Can I share my screen, Jerome?
Of course, you are co-host, so I think you should be able to.
It wouldn't let me a second ago. There we go. Perfect. So, and we'll put a link to this in, maybe I shouldn't because my screen is being weird. Okay, in the chat, but you'll see everything keeps freezing on me, but I'm
your
assuming
screen sharing is not coming through.
Which is weird because I'm plugged directly into my box. So, oh, did I go? Am I gone?
You're still there. We can see, or I can see you.
You can? I can't see anything. You guys are gone.
Well, we are just going to keep going on until you can catch up.
Well, you guys, keep going, and then I'll catch up in a minute.
When we were in the waiting wings, as it were, we were talking about the 4 and 5 agreements. We were talking about white-black thinking. What did you want to, in addition, share with us, Eric?
Yeah, I thought it would be helpful for our viewers and listeners to kind of talk about the 4 agreements, which is from a book by Don Miguel Ruiz in 1997. And I strongly recommend it. It's a quick read. It's got a lot in there, but the read is fast, but the thinking and the processing of it and how it relates to you, it takes some time. It's like a simmering soup on the stove. It really has to simmer in. So I thought it would be helpful. Maybe we can start with that. And I'm going to read them, and maybe we can, Lisa and Jerome and Brooke, maybe comment on them. The first agreement is be impeccable with your word. The second agreement is don't take anything personally. The third agreement is don't make assumptions. And the fourth agreement is always do your best. When I read the book, it reminded me of the Hemingway book, The Old Man and the Sea, which was written in a very basic way, not flowery language, but has so much in it. And that's how I'm reading this. Yeah. So the first agreement, being impeccable with your word. I know, and I'm reading now from the book on level 2. For coaches, speak with integrity, say only what you mean what you say, and don't, if you don't mean it, don't say it. Use kindness with candor. So, I mean, I thought that, obviously for coaching or for anything that you might be doing, impeccable with your word. It starts there, it seems to me. And as a coach, you must be impeccable with your word. You must be clear. You must be totally transparent without an agenda. Jerome, what do you think? Oh, you're muted there.
I'm a huge fan of that first one, which, yeah, being impeccable with your word is something that I think, especially within CLCI, I think we all kind of try to do. Me personally, I am pretty adamant about that fact of the matter because I'm someone that believes that your word is your bond. So when you say something, you should mean it. And I think you should be setting yourself up to be able to actually fulfill what you said. And that, right, that's why that means so much to me. I think that helps with communication as well, as far as any type of conversation that you might be having. If you are impeccable with your speech, you are meaning what you're saying, then it makes it easier, not just for you to get your point across, but for you to understand who you're speaking to as well.
Right.
Well, and I think also when we're comparing it with coaching, it is keep it simple. You know, you were mentioning some simplicity with this concept, yet deep thoughts that go with it. And being impeccable with our word is also encouraging our client to find their true value and what they're working on, working towards, and where they want to go with it. And the least, that's not what I want to say, the less that we can possibly say, but still say it and allow them to have that floor, that's going to be most beneficial to them. Thanks, Eric. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it actually, sometimes as a coach, the more you say, the worse it is. And I know when we did some of our training and coaching, some of the most effective times where the coach said the least, interestingly, not the most. So, and being impeccable with your word and making sure it's simple and clear, I think is key.
Yeah, I think some of the beginning coaches, some of the mistakes that they will make is they want to get it all and they want to help so much and they just really want to be there to help that person. So they become I think, and this is a guesstimate, more impatient with the process. But once the process gets going and that trust value, that is going to, while it maybe be a slow start, it avalanches and takes off.
Right.
Once you get going. Mm-hmm.
Again, my comparison here is like simmering soup on the stove.
Yeah.
If you're going to rush it, you're going to put it up and rush it. You take that soup off and start eating it, it's not going to taste right. Yeah. And it needs time to simmer. Seems to me that's coaching, but also the 4 agreements. You read it one time, you read it a second, you got to read it 3 times maybe and think about it and then apply it. So yeah, I think it's a great tool. Brooke, did you want to add anything to that? I mean,
I don't know where we're at.
Be impeccable with your word. Just talking about how.
Oh, that's like a religion. So that is, so my first, it begins with being honest, but then being impeccable with your word. It is, I mean, it's something you have to be so aware of with everything. If you're going to be truly impeccable. I mean, that can be all the way down to the littlest detail. For me, because I'm an artist and I saw a lot of artists and creatives have a tendency to not follow through or not finish. And so I said many, many years ago, I'm going to be somebody that follows through. I'm going to finish. When I start a project, I will finish it just so I could break that trend. And I've since then tried to be a woman of my word. And I won't say try, I have been a woman of my word. And it's something where you have to be very consciously aware and follow through. And it may not be always on time, but like finished on time, but it will get finished and it will follow through. And no matter what, it's very, very important to me. So I think it's a beautiful thing too, once you start doing it. But it's definitely can be, when you make a commitment, you really have to be aware of it and be willing to follow through, you know?
So now take it and put it on the coach hat. And how does that apply in addition?
Well, I mean, with regard to it's following through with your client, right? Being there before. I mean, I think you should be there before, early for every meeting, early for every session if you can. But just following through on anything that you agree with to do for or with your client. And just being impeccable with your word with regard to being a coach and following through with that as well. Eric, do you have thoughts?
I want to just spend a moment on the term your word for a moment, and because we talked about impeccable in that transcript, but what does your word mean? And before I became a life coach, I was a dad to two young daughters. They're all now grown up, but I thought of it wasn't life coaching, but raising them in almost like a baseball analogy. So if you're a pitcher, you're going to try to get a batter out, and you may get them out on a half curveball or a fastball, but you're not going to get every batter out with every pitch. So, and that's actually how it was with our two daughters. One thing that worked well, those words didn't work with the other, and vice versa. So it seems to me as a coach, your word has got to be flexible in terms of who you're dealing with. We talked about that in level 2. It's not the words you're talking about in the process are definitely going to differ depending on the personality of your client.
I definitely love that. That's a great point of view that you're sharing. Definitely as a coach, we are always, I say the chameleon, we're flexible with our clients and who they are. So great point, Eric. Thanks for saying that.
Sure, thank you.
I think too, I mean, you're also speaking to the flexibility in our languaging, right? In speaking their language and using, when we are mirroring what I'm hearing you say or things, there's some flexibility there, which, how does impeccable and that flexibility work together with one another is my next question.
Well, you obviously, I mean, you've got to use your intuition. I don't think that there is an objective process here. I think you're living here on the right side of your brain, and you've got to move where it feels right with your client. I mean, you can go in, like, again, with a baseball game, you can be a pitcher and go in with a game plan, but often those game plans get torn up in the middle of the game. Things kind of change, and you must be, as a coach, flexible to adapt to
Absolutely.
change, you know. And that,
I mean, I think adaptability is imperative no matter what. And it's funny because I've found the older we get, the harder it is to adapt. I think we become more and more rigid. And if we only stayed springy like kids, we could make it through a little easier. What do we want to move on to the next one?
Yeah,
maybe?
let's move on to the next one. Next one is don't take anything personally. And I think this is really, really the hardest one.
I would agree.
And on the other flip side of that, it's not about you, it's about them. And I keep saying that. I say that to lots of people. Now I say it to lots of people all the time because it's really, really true. You know, especially as a coach where you have a certain role. And sometimes I haven't seen it, but I've read about it where there could be some offensive things going on, not from a physical, but from from talk situation from the client onto the coach. I've had it happen with clients. I'm helping the client, giving them bad news, and they would say, well, I hired you, you're supposed to be my lawyer, why are you telling me this? Giving them bad news, but truthful news. So it's important that a coach and that we all not take things personally, it seems to me, and kind of maintain a little bit of a distance and keep our emotions out of it, because it's not about us, it's about the client.
Talk more about what you mean by maintain a distance.
I think that you can't get drawn in emotionally to their problems. I think you have to maintain a little bit of a screen. Certainly you empathize, but empathizing really is not going to help move the ball. I mean, you've got to empathize. It seems to me you have to empathize, but do more. You've got to come up with a game plan for them, specific goals. Sometimes it's the first time anyone has had that kind of talk to folks.
So I think as we share it in class, we talk the difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy, you're kind of, going through it yourself. Not only is your client, but you are as well, and you're kind of in the muck differently. When we talk about empathy from class, we're talking about, yes, we're in the muck with them, but we're not doing the muck with them,
Right.
as it were. We're present, we're emotionally available. So I would be using emotional. I'm not going to get upset or tearful, or I might have an emotional connection to the process.
Mm-hmm.
But as you're saying, it is to not take anything personally, is we don't own what they're going through, and we want to encourage them to have that ownership and where they want to go next. So there may be some challenge in how we interact with them. And I think that's what you're sharing with us here today.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, I think too, though, you don't want to draw parallels. I mean, and from your own experience, just because you may have had a personal experience with something similar, it doesn't mean that the answers, or should know the better way or know the right path at that point. And I think that can be applied in the don't take it personally section.
I think that's a perfect segue, because I do think we just spoke about the second agreement perfectly. The third one, if you guys don't mind, which I feel compelled to bring it up, is to not make assumptions, which kind of ties into exactly what Brooke is mentioning.
Yeah, don't make assumptions. Another one that I repeat to folks that I see pretty often. You can't assume certain things. I'm amazed how in coaching and also in non-coaching situations, how folks make really important decisions based on inaccurate assumptions about certain things, factual assumptions. It really, in the law, in personal relationships, in management, and in coaching. So as coach, we have to let the client lead the way. We have to fight against making an assumption about the particular client, and kind of let them lead the way here. And I have to honestly say to you that from my end, that is one of the most difficult things for me to do, because folks come in, again, back to kind of the dichotomy of what I do versus what coaching is. And, so folks come to me sometimes with, they want an answer. Certainly want to be heard, but they need an answer. And it might be a legal answer, may not be, but some sort of legal advice. And that's far different than the coaching. So I have to really go through kind of a orientation shift when I do my coaching.
Which is a great time to bring up what you were going to share about shadow, because when we make those assumptions, we're putting that information through our personal filters, those personal filters on how we grew up, how we experienced the world, the things that came back at us, how we formulated opinions, etc. What did you want to share with us about that shadow piece?
Well, in level 2, we looked at 2 drawings, and looked at the same drawing with 2 totally different conclusions from a visual standpoint. And we often hear in coaching, I know that I hear it sometimes, it's a black and white theory. And you're right, at least it does come from, to a certain extent, presumptions. It may not be factual, it's presuming facts. And suddenly, conclusions are made that maybe emotionally feel good, but don't have a basis in fact. So,
and this is something that clients can have be affected by, is that making their own assumptions, and then as a coach, we can ask them out of those, right? Hopefully.
You have to get them to think, we talk about it in level 2, the gray area. So let's get out of black and white. Okay, let's throw around some options. What's a middle ground? And by doing that as a coach, what you're doing them is thinking, I mean, another analogy is thinking outside the box. Their life may be governed by an in the box moments, in the box thinking based on past experience, based on certain assumptions that they made, based on taking things personally. I mean, your client's going to be taking things personally and then making those assumptions. So we've got to get them to rethink how they are acting and what activities they're going to do to pursue the situation. A lot of clients that I have, they're unhappy, but they don't know really why. Why are you unhappy? And they've never really thought through it. They know they're stressed. They know that it's a rough time, but why? And forcing them to really think about it and then visualize it is an important first step, I think, because some of these folks haven't done that.
Helping them express and share what's going on for them to help remove a block. Part of that, what you're exploring in this discussion is sharing on the positive side, how imagination, imagine if you can break through this, what's that going to look like? So in kind of an opposite, it's still an assumption, right? But we're using it for the good of things versus something that prevents us from moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I actually just started using that. My last session with one of the clients, I tried the visualization. We talked about a problem, we talked about a block, and I said, all right, we went through some discussion on that. And I want you to close your eyes, visualize what this might look like if X, Y, and Z happen. And I could see that was, that really, before it seemed to be lip service. By closing your eyes and visualizing it really seemed to hammer it home. It was, I found it effective and moving ball forward. So I would recommend coaches that are watching to consider that visualization technique as being helpful once you've kind of reached, or once your client has reached the conclusion that, maybe this is a way forward here. It's a goal, a valid goal.
Yeah, definitely. You want to have rapport built first. You're not going to just on the get-go introduce that tool. You're going to get their complete whatever they need to share with you and where they want to go with it. And then the imagine if, once that rapport and that trust value is built. So excellent.
Well, I've also used imagine if for the positive goal. I've also used it. Imagine if, and if it's somebody's catastrophizing, imagine what that looks like, and then walk them through it. How do you get through that? And imagine them managing through the worst possible situation, and then they go, okay, wait, I can handle that. And so it can work for both directions too,
right.
Both the positive goal setting and also for sort of prepping for maybe the other way if they're catastrophizing.
Yeah, sometimes if they visualize and talk about they know they're anxious, they're having some stresses, but if you're right, Brooke, if you get them to visualize and talk about the worst that could happen, I think that can really help in terms of just talking you through it. I think, and I saw this in level 2, it was amazing because it was done by Zoom, and I'm thinking, how effective would this be? But I was amazed during my sessions when I was the client, just talking about these things to someone who's objective and sympathetic and helpful. Really, it was a catharsis in terms of how you approach things. And getting them to talk and think, and getting them back away from making assumptions and don't take things personally, I think is an important part of the whole coaching process.
What is our next agreement?
The next agreement is always do your best.
Always do your best. Well,
always do your best.
There's some thought there that we are always doing our best. We are, at all times we are doing the best we can in whatever form that may right. come in, and it may not be. I mean, I don't know. I kind of have that's my feeling, is that everybody's always really trying to do their best. It may not be their best, but they may feel they could do better, but we are always trying to do our best. At least I am. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, I can comment on, was once asked to be on a board, and I was kind of lackadaisical about it, and I joined this board, and I think my work ethic on the board showed I was lackadaisical about it. Eventually got off the board, and I promised myself I would never ever go on a board again unless I was totally committed to it.
Mhm.
And then back to the 4 agreements, there was discussion in there about time effectiveness, and one of the discussions was the importance, interestingly, of saying no.
Mhm.
The importance of saying no. And then I happened to read an article about Warren Buffett, and he commented that one of the most important things he learned in life was no, because if you don't say no and you say yes to everything, coaches or clients, and it's really like diluting Coke, right? Isn't it? I mean, more water, you only have a certain amount of time. The power that you have in this particular endeavor is diluted because you need, some Coke for the next project.
And it also goes back to being impeccable with your word, right? If you're
Mhm.
saying yes to everything, that you're going to end up spreading yourself so thin, you're going to have a hard time being impeccable with your word at that point, right?
Right. Right. So always do your best has that side.
Mhm.
Doing your best. I mean, it's a self-regulatory thing, right? I mean, doing our best is self-regulatory. But if you've got that little voice in your head saying do your best, and you're not doing your best,
Mhm.
maybe others do. It's doing the right thing when no one's watching. I mean, there's also that, from a moral sense.
I think it's
Yeah, that
important too,
integrity is
though.
a big piece. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's important too, though, to also know not to the yes, we have that voice we have, but sometimes that voice can be a little more critical than really it needs to be. So there is a matter of finding that balance, or knowing when you're being overcritical and you maybe are in fact doing as much as you can. So it's kind of a fine line to walk, I think. I know there's plenty of times I can be overcritical, Lisa.
Never.
But
more critical than anybody else possibly could be.
I love that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
And then if somebody is critical, and that's where don't take it personal, I have trouble with, then you're going to tell me something, and then I'm going to up that ante much more, because I'm very concerned, conscientious, I care. I'm starting to get emotional about this, because it's never my intent to do anything to anyone that causes them pain. And so I take that, if they're critical with me, that I've caused them pain.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I understand. How do you manage that when you feel?
I do writing.
Mm-hmm.
I have a journal that I will do writing, or I'll do some typing or something. For me, it has to be external, because I trust that process.
Mm-hmm.
On that regard, there's an interesting story about Abraham Lincoln. When he died, they found a whole bunch of letters criticizing other politicians, criticizing lazy generals that he had on his staff, reaming them out, but he never sent them. He wrote them, but never sent them.
He was getting it out. He was getting it out.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. And I was thinking about that in terms of that situation, and today with email, because I'm sure you guys are like me. You're a recipient of emails, and I'm not sure some of the emails should have ever been sent.
Yeah.
It's actually too easy to send these things.
It's too easy to click that button. It's there.
It's there.
You should have to put a stamp on it and walk it downstairs.
Right. So always do your best kind of gets back to that. I mean, is your best, you've got to be self-regulatory. You've got to decide what's confrontational in itself. You're self-fulfilling your own process there.
When I started working in corporate, I gave myself a 24-hour rule. Anytime I was writing something that wasn't positive, or, I was writing from a place that I might be a little frustrated, or I always gave myself 24 hours before I would send it so that I could go back and read it the next day and read it with a calm, cool, clear head. And then often having somebody else read it as well is helpful too. But yeah, that send button is, it's dangerous across board. Text, it's dangerous. On social media. So I completely agree.
And it doesn't go away. It's there forever.
In perpetuity, yeah. And you can't take it back. You can't take it back. You can't be like, hey, don't open that email. Right. I love though what you said before we delved down this rabbit hole of doing the right thing when nobody's watching. I love that. That is so true. And I think that is how all people should live. It isn't always how everybody lives, but it should be.
Right.
Are we on number 4, which is the number 5?
I did want to talk about 5. Which
yeah, let's talk about 5 because it's a little controversial. 5.
I didn't actually realize there was a 5th one until I took level 2. But then his son, Don Ruiz Jr., Jose Ruiz Jr. wrote a sequel and wrote, "Be skeptical, but learn to listen. Be skeptical, but learn to listen." Mm-hmm. If I were writing it, I would have reversed that. Learn to listen, but be skeptical. I'm not sure why it was written that way, because I think the key here, and the key for a coach, is to learn to listen first. That's my opinion. What you do with it, if you're skeptical or not, if it's valid or not, I think that should be second. But so let's talk about learning to listen. Obviously, as a coach, if you're not listening, you're not coaching. The best coaching that I've seen is the coaching where the coach talks less and the client talks more, because that's cathartic for the client and is leading the coach where things should go. But we're all, and I know as a lawyer, you're kind of pushed to talk, and some lawyers that I know start talking without listening first. And what's the old adage? You have 2 ears but one mouth for a reason. So learning to listen, it's a critical thing that we have to do as coaches. Now, if you don't listen and you start talking, the problem that I don't think that that's really coaching. I think that takes you down a situation where you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you now become a mentor. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important, and this was kind of a distinction that I had to learn and still struggle with a little bit, is that distinction. So, in my law firm, I still mentor young lawyers. Okay, that's a different process. There is some life coaching involved, but mentoring is very different. You're coming up, you're telling your mentoree a lot. There's probably more that you're doing in terms of talking as a mentor than you are as a life coach. You better be listening there too, otherwise you're not going to be effective. But life coaches have to learn to listen. And one of the more effective things that happened, I think, during the recent materials that I completed was it's okay for silence. And I think that that's an extremely effective process for a coach or anyone, that you don't have to fill every single moment with talk. As a coach, I think if you stop and you listen and you actively listen, with the mirroring and those techniques we've talked about, you're going to learn a lot more. And the advice is to let silence work for you.
Sometimes when we're coaching and we get a particular challenge question, the client will stop and have a look on their face, and it's usually one that is thinking. You can tell when someone's thinking, And what a lot of newer coaches tend to do is reiterate their question or say it again in a different way, or it's just what you're saying, Eric, is that's just be quiet, ask your question, let the client sit with it, let them come up. They may go, I don't understand. And you might have to coach that side out of them. But you're right, that silence is totally golden. When you give space for that, amazing things come out.
I wanted to, I was looking up something because somebody mentioned this in class and I thought it was kind of brilliant. So when you look at the etymology of skeptic or skepticism, it comes from ancient Greek skeptikos, which means thoughtful or inquiring. So when you look at the word skeptical, I think that thoughtful and inquiring, that's coaching right there. So it kind of works beautifully with regard to that. And I think that maybe, there is a lot of negativity attached to the word skeptical and skeptic, in the sense that it means that we're second guessing, we're doubting, but if you look at it in such a way that it is that we are listening deeper, or we are listening for more, and maybe not doubting or questioning, but sort of that coaching deeper, that listening deeper tool is sort of how you can apply that skeptical angle with this. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. So skeptical doesn't mean they're not telling the truth. There's I guess there's that twinge. It's not the truth. It's really looking deeper and beyond the words, which is another thing that I think you have to do as a coach. Talk about body language for a moment. I'm thinking somebody's saying I'm okay and they're tearful. You could tell by their body language that they're not okay. There you're learning to listen. You're looking at the body language, but you're skeptical as heck because the body language is not consistent with what you're hearing. There's a way to put together.
We have about 5 minutes left, but so if you have a client come in and their body language, they're saying one thing and their body language is communicating another, how do you broach that without leading, or do you not?
Yeah, good question. Well, I try not to lead, but I keep talking. We keep talking more. Usually what I'm finding is the more they talk and the less I talk, the more cathartic it is. Sometimes just the act of talking, I think, gets results. Things come bubbling up that maybe are in the subconscious that weren't there. And that's why it's important that a coach has to be able to move. And I was talking before about have a game plan, but move from that game plan quickly, because stuff comes up and bubbles up. I learned some stuff recently from one of my new clients that, and I've had her for a couple months, never came up before. Suddenly it bubbled up to the surface. Something happened, and it was good that it came up. It was one of the blocks that she had. Just by talking and keep talking and thinking about it, I think was helpful. So be skeptical in a good sense, but learn to listen, and as a coach, get them talking as much as possible.
And that's really, it's getting them talking. That is the key, right? I was just shared this over the weekend that a lot of people are just looking for a space to share and just be able to share all the things that they can't share, and to allow somebody a safe space that they can do that, where they aren't judged, where they aren't there's no expectation, is a really miraculous kind of situation to be in, and that's what coaches provide. So it's far more needed than we realize, I think.
And also not relying on a cookie cutter coaching session, because what one session can be that you're not going to really address the body language, it might be pertinent in another coaching session that you do the somatic connection with things. So again, when you become more seasoned, you get used to trusting as a coach, we have instincts. You trust your instincts on what and when to go into those directions. The only way that you build those instincts really is to practice this skill set that we've been speaking about. So practice, practice, practice.
You know, asking these open-ended questions. I mean, I'm looking at the book. What would it take? What if you could? What do you have to be? I mean, these open-ended questions that aren't leading, but are giving someone the space to talk. I think that they're very powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. So let's one last sayonara. If anything else we want to say before we sign off, you know what, we will start with Lisa, and we'll go ladies first and then gentlemen.
Thank you so much for being here, Eric. It's been a pleasure listening to you and having you fill in a great detail and share personal experience along with your interpretation of the 4 agreements, or 5 agreements, excuse me. They are an amazing writing team, that father-son duo. Thank you again for being here.
And Jerome.
Thank you, Eric, just as Lisa was expressing, for bringing this to actually today's live so that we could speak about. I think not only is this the agreements, not only do I think that they can be very beneficial for a coach, it's something that if you can implement into your life, it makes life in general easier and much more comfortable actually going forth with. So thank you for bringing that to us today.
And Eric, make sure you share also where people can find you.
Yeah, I have actually created a website called imagesinspire.net, and they can get a hold of me that way, or my email at Eric, ERICD, @D as in David, P as in Paul law.com. I'd love to hear from anyone from their experiences. If I could be of assistance to anyone in kind of their challenges, in terms of coaching or otherwise, I'd be happy to help. This has been great. Thank you for inviting me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for being here, Eric. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for bringing, I love that we did the 4 or 5 agreements. It was wonderful. Sorry, I glitched out for a second. But thank you guys for watching. Everybody who is watching, make sure you comment, share, and like this video. Make sure you follow the Certified Life Coach Institute and check us out. You too could be a coach like Eric and be a Master Certified Life Coach in 6 days and have learned this amazing, or have in your pocket an amazing tool set for communicating at a minimum. And you can apply it. Again, another area, another coach that shows the many ways you can apply coaching in the many different professions that can be applied in. So thank you guys so much for watching. I think that's all for me. Jerome?
We'll see you guys here, same time next week.
4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, 7 o'clock Eastern. Bye, everybody.
Take care.